Military members honored at local Remembrance Day services. The regional hit with an increase of respiratory viruses. And a Canadian crew detained in the Dominican is coming home. Good evening and thank you for joining us. Today is Remembrance Day, and about 1,000 people gathered at Fort William Gardens for the first in-person ceremony there since the onset of the pandemic. It was one of several events held around the city this morning. We begin our coverage at the Gardens with this report from Riley McManus.
This year's ceremony was very special, as it included several firsts. This Remembrance Day marked the first time there was a female keynote speaker, as Lori Abthorpe, a veteran with the Canadian Armed Forces, assumed those duties. And the event included an Indigenous veteran guest speaker for the first time. Inspector Larry Ross served with the U.S. military and is a Cold War veteran who now works with the Anishinaabe-Aski Police Service. Ross explains the importance of gatherings like this.
Freedom is not free, and the younger people need to realize that yes, the world is a more dangerous place, but it's veterans that keep us safe and keep us free. And I can't emphasize enough that freedom has a price, and I'm glad that people still remember.
Veterans, along with current servicemen and women, were all in attendance, including Navy veteran of the Second World War, Roy L'Amour, who is also a lifelong member of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 5. The 96-year-old expressed his appreciation for the people in attendance and the importance of being back together in person.
It was sure good to see the people out, and it's sorry we missed the last 2 or 3 years, but you know, we got to give in sometime. But it's really enjoyable to see a good crowd out at the service here.
Many from the community came and laid wreaths to pay their respects and appreciation. Flanders Field was read aloud, the color parties paraded, and with the words of John McCrae on top of many minds, there was also a passing of the torch from one veteran to the next. Ken Malenko is the local arrangements chair with the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 225 in Kakabeka, and he expressed his gratitude for the people in attendance and the importance of the younger generations to be part of it.
I think the turnout was great. The one really rewarding thing to see, we reserved 2 sections in the stands for the schools. So we had 3 schools here as well, and that's really wonderful. Because honestly, it's all about remembrance, and if you don't get that across to today's youth, you know, it's important for us Legion people and for us veterans that we can continue this remembrance.
Riley McManus, TBT News.
We continue our Remembrance Day coverage at Waverly Park. That event once again saw hundreds of people come to the emotional wreath laying at the cenotaph. Basilios Bellows has that story.
It was a powerful event at Waverly Park, where around 500 people came out to brave the cold and honor those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. Dozens of representatives from local groups walked up to the cenotaph to lay a wreath in remembrance of the soldiers that fought to ensure the freedoms we as Canadians have today. George Romick with the Port Arthur branch of the Royal Canadian Legion says it's always incredible to see the turnout and support Thunder Bay is willing to give on Remembrance Day. He says it means so much to see the younger generation willing to learn about the importance of remembering our nation's veterans.
8 or 9 busloads of students from Bishop Gallagher School and the other schools that attended. And you know what? It's great for them to come out to be part of the Remembrance Day service and to also understand what their great-grandfathers did, the grandfathers did, or their fathers did in the service of their country.
Soldiers from different units in Thunder Bay marched through the park during the ceremony, joined by local cadets as well. MP Patty Haidu was one of the first to lay a wreath at the foot of the cenotaph, and she spoke about what it means to see such an incredible turnout for the event.
It is always heartwarming, no matter what the weather, to look out and see a crowd of people that are taking the time out of their day to spend an hour and a bit here. Be there for families like Carol Kluge, who have personally lost a son, and be there to honor just the generations of people who have served this country.
Year after year, events like the one at Waverly Park show how important it is for Thunder Bay to recognize those that fought for our freedoms. The wreaths laid here at the Cenotaph serve as a reminder of the so many that gave so much to make this country what it is today. Vasilios Bellos, TBT News.
Fort William First Nation members also braved the elements for Remembrance Day. About 150 people gathered for the annual November 11th ceremony at the Mount McKay Lookout. Active military personnel, veterans, band counselors, and community members battled the cold and snow conditions to pay their respects. There was a drum ceremony, a moment of silence, and the laying of wreaths as attendees remembered fallen veterans, particularly those of Indigenous backgrounds, including those from Fort William First Nation. The ceremony has taken place each Remembrance Day for the last 27 years and organized by Catherine Banning and her late father, Private Frank Banning, to help deal with his post-traumatic stress from serving in World War II.
It's our honor and our privilege to memorialize and honor the veterans of all Indigenous nations, but particularly Fort William First Nation on our land in our way, which includes a bit of the traditional Indigenous heritage as well as the traditional military facets of our Remembrance Day service. So it's just our honor and privilege to do it.
A trio of viruses, COVID-19, influenza, and a respiratory virus known as RSV, are putting a dangerous strain on hospitals across the province, and the Chief of Staff at the regional hospital says the Thunder Bay facility is no exception. As Kurt Black reports, the number of ER visits continues to increase.
We are seeing a significant number of respiratory illnesses presenting to the emergency department at this point in time.
Just like their counterparts in southern Ontario, the regional hospital is seeing a continued rise in emergency visits, brought on by what some are calling the multi-demic, as 1/4 of the hospital's 6,800 ER visits from this past month were designated as respiratory or influenza-like illnesses. But while the spike is something the local hospital is closely monitoring, Chief of Staff Dr. Bradley Jacobson says his greatest concern surrounds the ever-increasing number of children being admitted with RSV.
Our concern at this point in time is if we're looking at where modeling has come from Southern Ontario and looking at pediatric hospitals as an example, some departments are at 200% capacity in dealing with the very young and ill children at this point in time.
The trio of viral infections has also contributed to skyrocketing wait times in some hospitals, a reality that could arrive in Thunder Bay if illnesses continue to rise.
Speaking to some of my colleagues, not only chiefs of staff, but clinicians, some hospitals are projecting and actually experiencing now 24-hour wait times in some of their emergency departments. Our local emergency department certainly hasn't reached that state yet. But again, as everything sort of converges on one site, we can anticipate that wait times will increase.
Some steps the hospital has taken in response to the surge of viral activity include providing flu shots to staff and maintaining its mandatory masking policy. And Jacobson adds they may consider additional measures if needed.
We will have to reconsider our visitation policies as things progress, and if we need to reopen certain respiratory units, we certainly don't want to put our staff, vulnerable patients, and others at risk.
Kurt Black, TBT News.
As you heard there, hospitals across the province are struggling to cope, including Ontario's pediatric intensive care units. Siobhan Morris picks up the story.
It was in Dan Trivett's kitchen hours after a car crash in late October. He felt a frightening kind of pain.
Like someone was stabbing me in the stomach with a knife and crushing my ribs at the same time. Had to hang on to the kitchen counter, sweating profusely, basically blacked out.
An ambulance rushed him to Toronto General Hospital.
I guess I arrived there about 1:30 a.m. on Thursday. I didn't get to bed until 2 a.m. on Friday morning.
In those hours waiting, he heard intimate details of other patients' care, saw staff who looked stressed.
I only saw 3 nurses on duty, and I didn't see any doctors visible. I saw a lot of patients on stretchers in the hallways because there was no place to put them.
Pressure on Ontario hospitals has been building for months. Hospitals that care for children are in a special state of crisis.
We are absolutely swamped by all these cases coming in all at once.
A triple whammy of the flu, COVID-19, and RSV in kids needing help in scarce pediatric care beds.
We're over capacity by 10%, which means that patients are likely being cared for in unconventional spaces, and these are children.
In some cases, young teens have been moved to adult ICU beds because there aren't free pediatric beds.
That worries me lots. I mean, pediatric hospital, they have the right equipment. They have the staff that are trained to deal with 14 years old little girls who need their family around.
In Mississauga, Trillium Health has temporarily merged 2 pediatric units because of the increased number of children who are sick and require hospitalization and ongoing province-wide staffing challenges. The opposition maintains repealing Bill 124 would go a long way to filling gaps in hospital schedules.
Let the government show to those healthcare workers that have worked so hard that they care about them, that they will respect them.
That respect doesn't have to be about money.
We got to vaccinate our kids from flu. We got to vaccinate our kids for COVID. We got to, if your child is sick, don't send them to school. If your child is sick, don't send them to daycare.
Dan Trivet would like to see more and better paid staff so more patients aren't subjected to the long waits he was.
The system is definitely broken.
That was CTV's Siobhan Morris reporting. Well, parents interested in the new French language public school in Thunder Bay were able to attend an open house at the site this week. The public event gave families the opportunity to decide whether the school will be a good fit for their children. Parents were given a tour of the former Edgewater School by officials from the Grand Nord School Board. They also heard what can be expected from the Francophone school when it begins operating next September. Director of Education Sebastien Fontaine says feedback has been positive from parents who believe this new school fills a gap in the community.
Some of the parents that answered our survey, they were saying they were happy to see that French school is coming in the south of Thunder Bay, because actually the French school, I believe, are in north of town.
We're a Northwood family right now, and so for our oldest to go to school, it's an hour in the morning, and it's shorter in the afternoon, but yeah, that's a long bus ride, and so if we can just make our kids' days a little bit better and maybe focus more on the fun part of the day instead of the bus ride. So yeah, that's what we're looking for.
There are still many renovations that need to be done before the school opens. The board is also still on the hunt for a principal as well. Substance issues and suicide have been a growing concern in the Thunder Bay area, particularly during the pandemic. But now those in need of help can visit the Healing Place on the Fort William First Nation.
It was a dream of 2012 that I was living in this big house and a lot of people coming to it, and it was called the Healing Place.
Rita Fenton is a social worker and Fort William elder. She raised money to build a 26-foot-tall teepee in her backyard on Chippewa Road. It's meant to be used as a public healing space for individuals and families dealing with grief, loss, or trauma. Up until now, Fenton has been providing counseling and hosting full moon ceremonies in her home each month. But with more people showing up for help and wait times increasing for her counseling services, she felt the need to expand the healing space on her property.
After COVID, we've seen a rise in addictions, mental health issues, family violence, and my space, my house was no longer able for the people to come all together, so we decided that a TP would be a bigger space, and plus during the winter time it would be protected from the elements.
Fenton will continue holding sacred fires and full moon ceremonies in her healing place and welcomes anyone who's struggling to drop by at any time. Well, turning to the weather now, Fiona, we saw the pictures from those Remembrance Day ceremonies. The snow has started to fly out there.
Yeah, we had freezing rain for much of the morning, but it has transitioned to light snow a little bit later than we had expected, but we knew it was coming, and that was partially because we never broke the freezing mark. Low of -3, wind chills hovering around -6, and only warmed up a couple of degrees to -1, with wind chills again just a few degrees out from that. But winds were relatively light from the northwest, 7 to 13 kilometers per hour. To the west, Fort Frances is currently at -3, but a wind chill of -9. They've had snow earlier today. Right now, it's just kind of mostly cloudy. A little cooler as you head up into Kenora and Dryden at -6, -8 in Red Lake, and there the wind chills are currently hovering around -14. They've had light snow most of the day. Warms up ever so slightly into the east. In Armstrong, they are at -5, as is Greenstone, we believe. We have temporarily, we hope, lost contact with this region as far as the weather equipment is concerned. So the last noted measurements we got was -5 with some light snow. Marathon currently at -3, and Sault Ste. Marie still on the plus side, but slowly starting to cool down. They're at 6 Celsius under cloudy skies. Now, here in the city of Thunder Bay, we are going to drop down to -5, so not a really cold night compared to some locations, but wind chills will continue to hover around -9. We could see about 5 centimeters of snow. We are just on the edge of this system. The majority of the snow is further north, so it's a guesstimate that about 5 centimeters will fall. And as we head into next week, don't expect any reprieves, any real warm-ups. We've got a lot of very chilly air pushing in and another shot at a little bit of light snow. I'll have more details later on in the news hour.
Okay, thanks a lot, Fiona. Well, when we return, we'll have more on the Remembrance Day ceremonies in Ottawa. A lot warmer there than it is here. That's coming up right after the break.